So, okay, so the common claim of women there was to actually be recognized for that moving sideways as a progression. Did I understand that right?
Yeah.
So, and that means not being presented as somebody who interrupted something else, right? Yeah.
Interesting, because we were talking about this, weren't we, Alex, about rhetoric and language, and seeing it as an interruption is like seeing it as a negative.
Yeah, that's
that
the thing.
A career is a thing that's supposed to be linear, and what we're seeing is women's careers, of course, aren't linear. And if we use the negative of interruption, it's like something's not right, whereas actually she was discovering herself within her career progression.
And she learned a new skill, as you said. It actually, I perceive, the way you told it, it was an enrichment for herself, right?
Ah, very good. Yes, absolutely.
Welcome, dear viewers, to the PowerMind channel, your go-to channel for meeting inspirational people. And today is a special edition. We have prepared a great quiz for you, dear viewers. And for this, I'm happy to welcome my special guest, Professor Linzi Kemp. Hello, Linzi.
Hello there. Good to meet you, Alex.
And good that you had the time to come on. A very warm welcome to you. We have prepared for you, dear viewers, a nice quiz on how we frame careers. This is such a really important topic in our modern times because career framing plays an important role in how we can be inclusive and how we actually foster diversity. But we have prepared for you. But before we dive into that, let me introduce you. So, Linzi, you are Professor of Management at the American University of Rresearch, and you also are Director of Graduate Studies. So you're basically teaching women on leadership, organizational behavior, and you are passionate about making women's stories heard. You actually founded a think tank, which is called the Virtual Center for Women and Leadership.
Thank you. Yes. As you say, I'm a professor of management in the School of Business at the American University of Rresearch, Khaimah. And at AURAC as well, I'm the Director of Graduate Studies. We have an EMBA and an MBA. We do teach both men and women. And the research that I'm involved in and have been involved in for many years, because I've actually been in this part of the world on and off for about 15 years, is about particularly women and leadership, women and organizations, women and employment, and what is going on in their lives. And in particular, the reason that I do this research is so that women's voices can be heard about their life, their professionalism, their journey, without comparing it to men. So I do it as women's narratives and their information coming from their own mouths.
So thank you for that. And yes, exactly. You teach both women and men. Sorry, I forgot the men in there in the story. Now, about today's quiz, actually, we chose the fascinating topic of careers and career stories because you just recently did a piece of research that is passionate. It actually follows women in their career path and analyzes the narratives women take on their careers. So that one is a forthcoming piece of research, and we're going to explore it in such a way that you, the viewers, have an opportunity to actually test yourself in terms of how you, on a daily basis, frame careers. And as I said at the beginning, why is this important? Actually, we all have these ideas how a typical career should look like, and that often informs us how we then talk about it. And part of it, I experienced that myself when I talk about my own career, is subconsciously informed about how we think a career should look like. Now, can you maybe tell us a bit about the framing of the research, first of all, before we dive in? Like, what was the aim of the research, and what was the, how did you actually encounter your participants?
So I've been, doing work on women and organizations over in the Middle East, North Africa region for a few years. I was then fortunate to apply for a grant through the Sheikh Al Qasimi Foundation Policy Research, which is a grant research foundation in Ras Al Khaimah, where the university is based. So I, with some co-investigators, a colleague, Norita Ahmed at the American University of Sharjah, who was instrumental in us setting up originally the Virtual Centre for Women in Leadership. Also with my colleague in the School of Management, Dr. Abaka, and with a colleague, Sabir Haag, who was in the mass comms area. So he's a doctor in mass communications. Now, one of the things I would like to mention at this point is that that's an interdisciplinary team. So we've got people from MIS, information systems, we've got people from management, we've got people from mass comms. And I do think that when you do research together in this cross-discipline way, then it goes to a higher level and in different directions, wonderful directions, than you would ever have anticipated.
So we created important to say, actually, because you're taking different perspectives, right? And then you have, as you say, a higher level of outcome.
Absolutely. And it really proved the theory of teams that, you put people together and you get a better outcome.
You get more.
Because of that synergy working together. And that's certainly what happened. So we applied for a grant. The grant title, the title of the project is Women in Organizations, from theory to practice in the United Arab Emirates, with a particular focus on Ras Al Khaimah and the Northern Emirates, because we're in the north of the United Arab Emirates. And what we decided to do was to, yes, obviously we are academics, and so we need to produce papers in peer-reviewed journals. And the one that we have under review at the moment is called Turning Points, about stories of women in the Northern Emirates. So the goal of the project really was to investigate what was happening with women's careers in Ras Al Khaimah and the Northern Emirates. I'm a qualitative researcher, and I have interviewed many women over here and written previous papers. This one was aimed at getting what we call oral history narratives from women in the Northern Emirates. And because we're a multidisciplinary team, we put our heads together and our contact list together. So, right, who do we know, who we can reach out to and contact about being a participant in this research? And the criteria was 1, female, 2, working in the Northern Emirates.
Right. So this piece of research will be relevant to women all around the world because the participants came from totally different backgrounds, right? It's a very diverse public you actually interviewed.
Absolutely, a very good point to bring out. Because of the nature of the population of the United Arab Emirates, it's a very multicultural population. So it's only fair that we interviewed both Emiratis, who are the citizens of the nation, and expatriates like myself and all my co-investigators. We're all expats. So we've got national and expatriate women in Ras Al Khaimah and the Northern Emirates who we wanted to investigate what was their careers. What were those careers? Because really, we have a sort of, a stereotype or an idealistic form of what careers are. And most of the research has usually been based on men and their careers. I don't do a comparison, but I do, all right, so what are these women saying about their careers? And that's what we wanted to hear in order to think about, all right, so highly educated women in the workforce, how are they being recruited, how are they being retained, and how are they being progressing in their careers.
Yes.
And that was the initial idea of the research.
And what I find fascinating about this research and about the setup is that you focus on the narrative. And I want to stress this. I cannot stress it enough. This is a topic that I'm passionate about myself. It is, how do we speak on a daily basis when we refer to anything in our work life? Because the words shape our reality, right? And the words in which we relate to something, so for example, in this case, career, shape how we think and pattern our thinking about it. And that is actually what I want to bring out today for the viewers, in terms of to test yourself. How do I frame myself, maybe, or others' careers, and what do I think is good or bad, or how do I judge careers? So as you said as well, you don't compare with the male perspective, and it doesn't have to judge the male perspective, because it doesn't have to be good or bad. But what is important to do this work about ourselves, right? To stay okay consciously. How do I normally think it should be, and how do I present myself in relation to that? And that creates how we then also, for example, in a recruitment dialogue, how we present ourselves. And that can make a huge difference. So
yes, absolutely, because there's an assumption that women now have, this is international,
right,
women now have equal access to the workforce, and equal equality in the workforce, and opportunities are equal. And yet the stories that we hear from women may tell us something different. So we need to listen to those stories.
We need to listen to it. That one I want to underline. And we need to maybe include them in organizations. When we work in organizations on our everyday basis, we need to simply include these stories as normal. So the second point, I think what your research will bring out, and for the viewers, this research is forthcoming. So I'm going to link it in as soon as it's going to come out, obviously. But the second point is really, I think we all have a responsibility, a shared responsibility of actually normalizing stories from all sorts of groups. So be it men, women, it could be also a group of, I don't know, a group that we don't think about in daily life. That normality doesn't have to be found in a single way. It can be in a pluralistic way, right? So
absolutely. So the research question that we came to ask ourselves, because we started to discuss, okay, we've interviewed these women, and we interviewed a sample of women in the northern area, in the Northern Emirates. What were we finding they were telling us? And to cut a long story short, so we're reading and hearing the stories of these women, and what struck us very much was what became the subject of a paper, and actually a policy paper which has been published, is what motivated the career turning points for women in the Northern Emirates. Because what we realized is that there were careers going on, and then a woman would change and do something else. And we were really interested in the, what made them change and do something else. And we turned this career turning points because our colleague, Dr. Sabah Haag, had done a lot of work on stories, because he's a storyteller through his film production. And this idea of turning points came up. So we collected these life history narratives. We then had them transcribed. We dived very deeply into find out, okay, what is this, all this data showing us? And so it captured very rich data. And from this capturing of very rich data, we had to identify themes that were coming out. And the themes that were starting to come out in the stories, I will talk about in a minute. But interesting things, like one of the women was telling us about that, well, basically, so she was working in a public service situation and working very hard. Women are very good at working very hard and very diligently, okay?
I can confirm that.
She's working very hard and had worked there for a long time, and it is in the sort of public sector. And then realizing, hang on a minute, I'm not getting promoted, even though she was quite senior. And then she realized that the people above her were, for various reasons, not going to move on. There was no fluidity. There was nothing that she was going to be able to do. And so she thought, well, okay, in that way, what am I going to do if I leave? And that's when she just decided, right, I'm going to leave because I see above me I can't get any more promotion, and went and applied for a completely different job in a completely different sector. Yeah. And ended up actually in tourism development, which was quite fascinating. And then because she ended up in that, she then gained lots of skills, and one of them she mentioned was about consulting. So,
she completely
in summary, she switched from plateauing and realizing that she was quite comfortable in plateauing in wherever she was in one sector, then going into something very different, and then realizing that, okay, I'm now getting new skills in this new agency. And then, so a career path, if you like, then went sort of like sideways.
Question again. So, dear viewers, we would like to ask you now on how would you frame that story you've just heard from Linzi? Or if you would like, you could also share your own experience of having such a turning point or similar one, how you would put that into your own words. So use the Padlet. We're going to actually do a little experiment. We're going to link in a Padlet so you can actually put your own interpretation to that question right there in typing.
Write something about when that's happened to them, that they've taken a sideways move, or they've realized that they're plateauing and have to take a sideways move in order to gain new experience. Could ask them to write their own synopsis of their own story.
Now, may I ask you, Linzi, how in your research, how did you then come to a conclusion, or how did you conclude in your research team on how you would frame that? The turning sideways.
That's what I'd like. Yeah, that's a turning point.
So
in that situation, so in that situation, if you think about it, she'd created her own turning point, and that's one of the themes was recognition of me within career progression. So not just that story, but a few of the stories, we put them together and we come up with a theme. And the theme that we came up with, perhaps related to that one, is recognition of me within career progression.
Right. So, okay, so the common claim of women there was to actually be recognized for that moving sideways as a progression. Did I understand that right?
Yeah,
and that means not being presented as somebody who interrupted something else, right? Yeah.
Interesting, because we were talking about this, weren't we, Alex, about rhetoric and language, and seeing it as an interruption is like seeing it as a negative.
Yeah, that's
that
the thing.
A career is a thing that's supposed to be linear, and what we're seeing is women's careers, of course, aren't linear. And if we use the negative of interruption, it's like something's not right. Whereas actually, she was discovering herself within her career progression.
And she learned a new skill, as you said. It actually, I perceive, the way you told it, it was an enrichment for herself, right?
Very good. Yes, absolutely.
And that is something, the word enrichment should be something I think that should feature in our everyday vocabulary, and I'm including myself. May I just ask your opinion on that? Is there also, in terms of how careers are being presented in job adverts, what is your opinion? How careers are being advertised in terms of how people are incited to apply maybe for a job advert? What is your opinion on that? Because in my view, I really still perceive, and that's a European view, that the job AdWords always invite people with these linear careers. So you need to show a certain progression. It's even sometimes put into sentences where you are, how is the sentence that invites people where there shouldn't be any gap in your CV, you know, that age-old thing.
Or explain the gap.
Exactly. And that is still there. It's even in the job
Yes,
AdWords. Is that your perception in your region as well, or like in the research?
I hadn't thought about it that way, Alex, but actually I think you're right. So we have an expression in England because of the tube trains. We say, mind the gap, mind the gap, because that's a hazard. Yeah. That's a hazard. So you're right. So very often when you're applying for a position, a job, you have to then give your CV and account for any gaps. And gaps are seen as a negative or a danger or a problem, and you've got to fill the gap. Well, obviously, you know, you can fill the gap by covering it up. You can fill the gap by explaining it in a way that people will understand, and making it into something positive is quite difficult. But it's only because these careers are supposed to happen in a certain way, in a linear progression.
The linear thing that you mentioned, exactly.
Yeah. And not really get off for your own idea of how you're going to get promoted or for self-development. You're not supposed to get off that career path.
Yeah.
See, again, the language we're using, career path. And career journey.
Even the word path is actually suggesting in our subconscious it has to be something on the same path. So now I find it interesting, even the word turning point reframes us because it's something positive. It was like, this was a turning point for self-development.
Yeah,
so that could be something featuring in interview questions, like which turning points did you take in order to self-develop, for example. You know, it starts with these easy rephrases, right?
Yeah, and actually you're getting to the point that we got to when we start, you know, so we looked at the whole story that was delivered by these women. We then started on, obviously we did some coding, of descriptive coding of the transcript, but then we started looking at, hang on, we've got these career turning points. We need to categorize them. And we started to look at what we broke down into cause, course, and consequence, i.e. what happened before the turning point in relation to a career, what was an external influence on the turning point, and what had intrinsic meaning for these women in these turning points.
That's interesting.
So we were putting the external influence and the intrinsic meaning of these women together to try and make sense of why they turned in their career. And there were many reasons, many reasons.
But these reasons also, that is basically, and we have to absolutely link the research paper once it's out, because they can also inform, you know, enriching and positive vocabulary we can employ, organizations can use to maybe, you know, refer to what is success as well in a career, because the whole notion that swings with that is, what do we actually judge to be successful in our lives, in our careers, in our working lives? So, you know, I think it's a huge topic. It's a very important and timely topic, and for diversity and inclusion, I think it's something that is urgent. We need to change our words.
Absolutely. Yes, because they just take that word success. And I was thinking about another story of one of the women who we interviewed, and she recognized that she was working in a very senior finance role, and she felt she didn't really fit in, hadn't got any friends there, but of course the money was really, really good. Really, really good. And then, you know, time goes on and she realizes that, you know, she gets married, has a family, has a couple of kids, and then realizes, well, this money is great, but, you know, when a child is sick, for instance, and I want to be with him, then I can't take that time off. And she again took a very different direction and actually went into academia because it gave her security, which was the intrinsic meaning to her, but also gave her more opportunity to spend time for herself and with her young family. And that, was very important to her, much more so than the previous external motivation of finances.
Right. So that one was also a turning point example?
Oh, yes, definitely a turning point. And she'd actually, so she turned, and it turned from the industry that she was in, so she was in a financial industry, to going into the higher education industry.
So, also very enriching, actually.
Yes, yeah.
What I just learned from these examples as well is that the enrichment also comes from changing contexts altogether, in this case, industries, which means another criteria for organizations could be how did you actually, have you seen different contexts in your career? Or was it a mono-context career so far? Which would be, a negative framing of the one path in one context.
Yeah. And another theme that came out, and perhaps that story of that woman I've just given, is the discovery of her own talent through her experience. So she found out, she's got a postgraduate in finance, which then gets her a job in the bank. So her talent is in finance and banking, but she could move that talent to a different industry.
Right. So that is actually also, discovering one's talents, and also the how would you call that? Or how did you call that in your research? The applicability to different contexts. That is a skill.
We actually called the theme, we called the theme discovery of own talent through experiences.
Very good. Brilliant. So let me ask the viewers, dear viewers, this would be another question to you. How would you describe yourself, the ways in which in your own career and working experience, how did you discover your talents? What kind of experiences were it that let you discover what your core competences or skills, talents were? Because that is
that we were making was that there are many reasons coming out from external forces in intrinsic meaning for these women. And one of them, in fact, you've just mentioned it there, about being offered, being offered extra opportunities. So these women were, a theme that came out from these women's stories was being offered and accepting professional opportunities or personal opportunities that came up. And sometimes these came up from people they knew in their network. So, there was intervention by members of in a professional network, or sometimes, they were opportunities that they saw for themselves. Was a really big thing. Who in your network may be offering you opportunities, or maybe you could speak to them about opportunities. Not just your boss in your own workplace, but other personal and professional, personal and professional people in your network who might be able to offer you opportunities, or even, suggest linking with somebody else in their network who can offer opportunities.
And that is so relevant in today's times of LinkedIn as the massive worldwide network for opportunities. So dear viewers, you've heard it there. That's an excellent, another question for you. What is your relationship to your own network? Who are your opportunity givers? How would you describe that in your own words? So have a type, have a response. I'm looking forward to the responses already. And
another theme was surviving or thriving through the roller coaster of personal and professional life. And I think a really nice one was portrayed by a woman that we'll call Kathy, because all the names were given pseudonyms. And it was really interesting. So she'd done a bit, when she was doing a postgraduate, she'd done a bit of traveling, okay, but she'd been with a group, but it had piqued her interest in traveling. And then once, when she had left university, she went traveling by herself for an extended period of time, okay? So she does this traveling, and then when she was out traveling, she met somebody, all right? So this person that she meets quite out of the blue, well, on one of her travels, and she met him, liked him. Eventually, he became a very significant other because she married him later. But it was just meeting him.
It sounds like that.
But he wasn't from her own country.
Right. Okay. So that's
which is interesting, isn't it? So
yeah.
She meets somebody who's not from her own country. They have a romance over a few years. Then it's realized that, you know, either he moves to her country or she moves to his country in order to get work. And that's what she did. And she moved
that was
in
for her
order
surviving. She framed that as surviving.
Well, thriving.
And thriving. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thriving.
Surviving, thriving through the roller coaster of personal and professional life. And it also can be that intervention by a personal network. Now, you know, she didn't go traveling. She'd got a job. I think she might have been in between jobs or been between qualification and getting a job. But she saw the opportunity, and over time, she then went in a completely different direction to a different country and thrived and made a very, very significant change in her professional life, but thrived in that as well, in a completely different country. I think that is beautiful,
the thriving. That is really beautiful because it shows actually, again, this aspect of enriching through through just taking what comes in your life and making something with it. She took that wonderful encounter and built her life even better through that, right?
Oh, yes. That
and is then, fascinating, you know, yes.
Yeah. And the thing is, of course, this is, again, that example of an external force, you know, meeting somebody from outside, then having intrinsic meaning in her personal life, which then causes a professional move. Not as though, you know, we were talking about stereotypical careers where you're supposed to be planning for 5 years ahead.
Yes, that's a stereotype.
And that, you know, and that's a great idea of a theoretical career. But in reality, these women as a whole, this sample of women that we had wonderful careers. And they were still having wonderful careers. But they certainly weren't a stereotype of a linear career that you're expected to sort of get in at the bottom and then progress up. Or they, through the way that they reacted to external forces and were very cognizant of wanting intrinsic meaning, they did, you know, look out for professional opportunities and offered them, got offered them, accepted them, were cognizant of intervention by others, were also very much recognizing their own talents as well. And they, you know, they navigated their
That's
own
a beautiful
careers.
word as well to describe it. They navigated this in a very sense-giving way. Another word that I want to underline, you mentioned that they were looking for intrinsic meaning. So there's a certain mindset aspect that is common to these women that you just gave us examples.
Well, I think, they're
looking for meaning in that, right?
Yeah, that's what came out to us. So there was external forces, and you can react to external forces, can't you? But these external forces melded with the opportunity that these women felt that gave them intrinsic meaning. It meant something to them to do what they do. They weren't just doing it for the sake of it or in reaction to something. They were doing it because it held something that they were was very meaningful for them.
To them. Would you actually say that these women also, I mean, common to them must be this drive to to be they are the guides of their own lives. They were not reacting, because if they had a different mindset, they could have said, oh my God, again, a disruption. I am so prone to all these disruptions, my poor myself. Oh my God, I will never succeed. You know, that could be a different mindset, you know?
Yes, very much. And it was what we took from it is they were very realistic about their past and looking at their careers, and the way they talked about Alex was very positively.
That's it. And that's the positive
in
framing,
retrospect, right? they're telling their stories, and they were naturally, because this is their life history narrative, and we were just asking them to talk about their careers. These are the stories they came out with, and they were looking back at them as very positive stories, and the turning points were just part of what life is, what professional life is.
Yes, life is
melded
actually, I mean, our work
life.
Is our life. Yes, I think I have that from you. You wrote that somewhere. I read that, I think on your profile.
Yes, I think it's on my Facebook.
Yeah,
and I was on my LinkedIn. Yes. Yeah,
exactly, and that summarizes it. And actually, this is actually the skill. So dear viewers, that is something I want to invite all the viewers as well to reflect on. That's the skill, the positive framing. This is not just for organizations, or maybe now let's take HR professionals. We need to always remind ourselves, we need to positively frame our own, you know, whatever we experience in our
narrative.
Life. Our narrative, our words, our vocabulary, how we phrase a sentence about ourselves. But also, if I may come back to that job interview example, how we actually ask questions as well is so important. So if I ask maybe somebody who joins my team freshly, if I say, oh, so you had quite an interruption there, I think I will frame it in a more negative sense than if I say, oh, wow, so how did you enrich your career through that experience?
And what we're bringing out here, because obviously, you know, that we like to have value for practitioners. And I think that's a very good point you brought out, Alex, that it helps us to form better interview questions.
Questions,
human resource managers.
Or like work dialogues, how we then work on a daily basis together. I had that so many times in my different roles, that when we refer to each other in breaks or in teamwork, or when we just talk to each other at work, how we always do mini interviews as well over a break. We would ask, how did you actually, what did you do before you came to this workplace? And then the person starts talking. And when we then interview each other, I think we need to find positively framed stories also of referring to the other. That is so important, because, you know, we reflect something on them. If I now ask you, so was it not an interruption when you moved to that region, you will react to a different way than if I say, oh, how rich was it to moving that region?
Very good. Yes, absolutely. And that would make for better organizational improvement in organizational culture, because of the way we speak about careers, and also accepting the diversity in people's careers
and in their stories. Yes, so thank you for that. Now just be so interested in your opinion on the whole topic of adaptability. You've probably seen there's this whole buzz going on about the skill of adaptability, future skills. Is this something that, now having heard these stories, that you think it's becoming more important in the modern working world? Or do you say, no, that's always been there, it's just we need to refer to it in a different way?
Interesting. So if I take you back many, many years, when I was working in the States and at State University of New York, I had a wonderful dean. And she used to talk about working within a state of ambiguity. And that really taught me all those years back about the need to be adaptable. And then flash forward a few years, I had another director who talked about the need for tolerance and adaptability within our working lives. And these are superb leaders that I've worked for, because it's not just about getting that. It's not only that you can get the task done. It's about recognizing that the environment that we're working in, you need to be, well, what is one of them, as you say, flexible, adaptable, and tolerant. Fact. You have to learn to live with ambiguity, because the world of organizations and the world of careers, to go back to the research that we've been doing, is very confusing.
And it can change every day, can't it? That's what I experienced as well.
Yes, and we can get confused and upset and resistance to all these things that are being thrown at us. But as I mentioned about my dean, who's saying about we're living in a constant world of ambiguity.
Yeah. And it's up to us then that we make something out of that, right? That is maybe also an important message of today's video. So thank you so much for all that. That was brilliant. Really, thank you for sharing those stories. So I'm already looking forward to the viewers' answers to their framing of their careers. Thank you so much for your time. That was really, really powerful.